Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys. Memories of Creature 88 by user RegalLegalEagle. Chapter 14. Promises. So, how does this work? Vincent said as he stared at the screen, but nothing responded. Was the main computer not functional down here? He reached out, trying to make some sense of the terminal. Voice command function. He tried and heard something whir. Voice command input enabled. Activate tutorial? Command not recognized. Help function? There was a pause, and then he saw the chairman's face come on screen. If this is being played, then I'm dead. Hopefully you are the Shade watching this. Unless, of course, you killed me, in which case I swear I will have my revenge from beyond the grave. Vincent arched a brow as he listened, figuring this must have been recorded well before the other message. In the more likely event that you didn't betray the patrol, I'll explain the basic features of this terminal. It was installed by a third party whom you don't need to know about. Likely the wardens. You can cut and edit portions of whatever memories are loaded on your current black box, or more simply encrypt everything in such a manner that a specific passcode will be needed to unlock it. While, at the moment, I don't think it will be necessary for you to need to hide your memories from the hierarchy, there is a chance. While I am loath to put my faith in you, Shade, I expect you to defend the city and keep the peace. Good luck. The video ended, and Vincent looked over the screen. He saw a still image of his first memory after updating the black box before coming here. He thought about simply trying to edit his memories, but couldn't think of a way to keep everything he'd learned secret so easily. Instead, he said, Encrypt Day. Passcode? He paused for a moment and tried to think over something they'd never guess, but he could remember. Catherine. The screen flashed for a moment. Passcode accepted. Disconnect. There was relief from the back of his neck as the needle pulled out, and he stood up from the chair. He walked to the door and noticed the keypad. He activated it and entered a new lock code. He couldn't use his normal combo in case they tried that, so he thought it over for a moment and then just kept hitting 8s to fill out the encryption. It was simple, but he wasn't sure how good the patrol's encryption breakers were anyway. Then he walked back out into the prison, walking past the other cells, up to the first two. So, Balder, you seem helpful. What are you in for? He asked the reptilian that reminded him of a bush viper. I killed a dragon, he said simply. Vincent arched an eyebrow as he looked the creature over. It was athletic and lean, but dragons were walking tanks. He was about to ask when Balder opened his mouth and 2 fangs clicked into place. I'm extremely venomous. Ah, well, why did you kill a dragon? He had manipulated some financial markets and bankrupted a few companies, one of which I worked for. He claimed it was all in the name of the greater good because the industry could spiral out of control and totally ruin the Union if he let it. Afterwards, the AI agreed with him and he hadn't done anything illegal, so nothing happened. He got rich. People lost their jobs. Everyone moved on. But I needed that job for the health insurance. My brother needed it more specifically. After he died, I spent 2 years tracking and following that bastard until I could strike. Got him on a night out on the town, evaded his private security, and surrendered to the patrol. Vincent arched his brows again. You certainly seem dedicated, but I thought murder was always punished by execution. Well, I had 3 things going for me.
public pressure was on my side, since I was hardly the only person who hated the piece of shit. Second was knowing that if I was put into any of the general prisons for normal life in prison, there was a good chance the dragon's security forces would murder me. And the chairman mentioned it might be nice to have a pet who could kill dragons.
Balder shrugged. So how long have you been in here?
3 years, give or take. What about Pyrrha here?
He glanced back at the strange creature.
She was...
Let me tell it!
The creature shrieked to interrupt.
Fine,
Balder said with a shrug.
I was just a lowly peon, working for one of the many pharmaceutical guilds. Nothing special at all, toiling away, day after day. One day, one of my bosses sent me to oversee a new experiment that I'd previously warned them against. The mixture was too unstable and dangerous. Sure enough, as I watched it begin to go haywire, I bravely rushed in to stop it, avoiding an explosion, but entirely exposing myself to the compound in the process. Then the old version of me died, and the true version of me was born. Interesting, special, powerful.
She began to laugh maniacally.
She does that,
Balder muttered.
I realized my true potential. I began to terrorize those who had wronged me in the past. Robberies, terror. I made sure to become as famous and well-known as possible. I was planning on escaping, of course, but I was captured before I could. Then I was dropped off in this boring hellhole.
So you never murdered anyone? Vincent asked as he arched a brow.
Not on purpose. Some people did die during my terror spree, but more as a side effect.
She shrugged it off, or made a shrugging motion. How come they kept you alive?
Because I'm too amazing to destroy.
They wanted to analyze her first, Balder said. They ran some tests, took samples, and then just stopped coming.
All right. What about that tongue creature thing?
That was the chairman's pet.
What? You can't be serious. Why is it in a cell? Vincent frowned at the idea.
It's extremely dangerous. He would take it on hunting trips.
Balder shrugged while Vincent tried to figure out if that was normal for Yurvesh or not. How about that metal cube?
It's an ancient and powerful war machine that's poorly understood. Don't touch it.
It's a cube, Vincent said as he peered into the cell.
Right now it is, yes. And since I'm sure you're going to ask, we don't know what's in the water tank,
Pyrrha added in.
It was here before either of us.
What about the vulture?
The what?
Balder asked. The avian-looking fella in that last one. Vincent pointed.
Ah, that's Kavus Norlin. Possibly the greatest thief of all time. Art, statues, jewelry. His list of thefts is legendary. They still haven't found his main stash. He escaped from literally every other prison the Union tried to put him in. He's been here a few months.
Why is he so quiet?
He just pictures the various things he's stolen all day. He likely didn't even notice you were here.
Hey, Balder! Why are you being so helpful to the Shade anyway? You're generally far surlier than this.
Vincent looked to Pyrrha, who had spoken up again, and then back to Balder, now curious about the answer. The reptile shrugged.
I don't know. As soon as I saw him, I just knew I'd like him. Like I could trust him. Something about him just...
The reptile shrugged again.
Oh, I see. You wish to mate with this one. How curious, as I believe you're both males.
It's not like that, Pyrrha.
No, it's quite all right for you to have such feelings. I personally thought you were nothing more than an aggressive automaton personally.
Just because I don't write awful poetry about the person who caught me, Balder began.
You take that back!
Pyrrha suddenly lashed against the force field.
Just because you're a simpleton who doesn't understand true emotions that come spewing forth from my soul doesn't make my prose awful. Simply misunderstood.
Spewing something, all right,
the reptile muttered. Vincent finally rose his hands. Okay, enough, you two. Pyrrha, where were you originally going with this, or did you just want to start bickering like school children? The silence made it clear that was her only intent. Well, soon a bunch of patrol will be coming through, and I don't want you guys to tell them I was down here. What will that cost me?
I've got no love for them. I'll just stare them down like usual,
Balder said, which surprised Vincent a little.
You're getting soft, Balder,
Pyrrha hissed out.
I want freedom.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. The creature grumbled and seemed to melt into a puddle for a moment before getting taller once more.
All right, fine. Chocolate and alcohol next time you visit.
What is this, Valentine's Day? There was silence as the creature stared at him, and then Vincent shook his head. Never mind. What about my silence? Vincent was surprised by the new voice, and he looked down to see the thief in the last cell now facing him. Yes, I am aware you're here. I'm far more observant than Balder gives me credit for. What do you want? I want one of my paintings. Vincent laughed. What, you're going to give me your stash, which the hierarchy is still looking for? Yes. Vincent stopped laughing and blinked. What makes you think I won't just give it all to the hierarchy? Because you're smart. You'd rather have a new ally than let the hierarchy have some art back. Besides, almost all the pieces in there have counterfeits hanging in their museums. They vastly underestimate how much I've stolen and replaced already. Vincent stared at the vulture as he thought it over. I feel like this is a trap. I'm an art thief, not a murderer. What's the worst I would do? I don't know, but I also don't know you. Be that as it may, I will reveal your presence here unless you promise to help me. Vincent set his mouth for a moment as he realized he was stuck. Fine. How do I find your stash? I require a data slate to explain how to get there. Well, I didn't bring one. Bring one next time. I don't mind waiting. Vincent frowned a little at how easily the criminal trusted him. Two of them, really, as he glanced back at Balder before scratching his head. He'd have to figure out how to approach this, but with the Yervish waiting outside, he'd need to go report soon before they began to worry. He doubted they'd try and force the defenses of the estate, but he wasn't really willing to risk it either. All right, chocolates, alcohol, and a data slate or something. He looked around at the felons and then at the bullfrog dog in the cell who snapped its tongue at the force field once more. Vincent nodded to Balder and Pyrrha, and then headed up the stairs. He walked through the house as he rubbed his chin, trying to figure out how to play this all off. Computer. He didn't hear anything, so he tried again. House thing, are you listening? Yes. It must need some sort of direct question or command to respond. Who has access to your systems? After determining several systems were tampered with after the death of my owner, I have reverted to default security measures until a new command prompt is entered. Meaning what? No one can access your systems? I have reset all passcodes and commands for authorized persons not currently present. Vincent tried to make some sense of that before speaking up again. You mean, right now, I'm the only authorized user in your database. And my owner, who's dead. Who is deceased, yes. Can I create a new passcode for myself? I do not understand. A passcode for what? Don't I need a passcode to verify my identity? No, I will only verify identity of persons within observable space to ensure no tampering or error. But you just said I needed a passcode. Not for identity. You need passcodes to access systems remotely, which I will not allow until I can verify new user security protocols and hardware have been installed. Vincent sighed for a moment. This was the sort of thing he hated about talking to computers. Sometimes they failed to make connections that should be obvious. All right, can I make it so no one else can be authorized and then set allowances for who can enter and leave? Yes. No one else can be authorized without my consent in person. All areas of the house are open to members of hierarchy forces such as the patrol. The prison is only open to members of the patrol who have authorization from me or the council, and that private chamber within the prison is off-limits to everyone but myself, and make this all the official encryption of the chairman, as in you'll inform people he ordered it. Why would I do this? It was part of his commands that I received in that private room in the prison. Vincent waited to see how smart the computer was. My owner is very cautious and showed extreme trust in you. This set of parameters falls within logical course of action to be carried out in his untimely demise. I shall change security allowances to reflect these new rules. Vincent let out his breath and walked back into the main room that he'd admired when he first entered. He walked over to the bar and looked at the unfinished drink on the counter, thinking about how hard it would be to explain the smell of alcohol on his breath to the patrol outside. With a heavy sigh, he poured out the remainder in the sink. Computer, what do I do with dirty glasses? There was a click as a drawer with rows of dirty glasses opened up. He set it in place, closed it, and then heard the computer. Shall I clean the glasses? Vincent paused and thought he might get lucky. Has anyone but the chairman used the glasses? Besides the chairman and myself. 2, one by second chair Cayena 3 days ago, the other by unknown person. No data available. Vincent looked around as he thought it over. When the forensics team arrives, make sure to tell them which one that is. Very well. Maybe they'd slipped up. He could only hope. With that, he thought about inspecting the rest of the house. Perhaps there were other clues the chairman had left, although the recording had been pretty rushed, and the Yervish were still waiting. Deciding against taking up any more time, he walked down the long hallway to head out of the house. He was curious about the bottleneck, but since this was technically a prison, it might be on purpose. Either way, he was soon back outside, and he could see the various patrol teams obviously antsy to get inside. All right, you've got access to the house. The body is in a rock garden. There's a glass you guys need to check. The computer will show you. He stepped to the side as the Yervish began to stream past him. Just then, he couldn't help but yawn hard enough that he almost thought he was going to cramp his jaw. A wave of tiredness hit him when he suddenly realized that he hadn't slept. After waking up from being dead and then finding his magnum, he'd been awake. It was always hard to gauge how tired he was at times because the fresh bodies had months of sleep in them, and it took a while before everything finally caught up. Occasionally, he'd just die before getting tired and keep going without stopping until it finally hit him, which it was doing now. He shook his head and blinked a bit as he tried to shake the sensation. Something wrong, Creature 88. He turned and saw one of the council chairs and quickly stood up straighter. It was one of the females. What was her name? Sorry, Council Chair... Cayena, the woman who'd visited the chairman 3 days ago. Ah, yes, I'm not great with names. That's fine, but you didn't say what's wrong. Oh, tired, ma'am. I haven't slept since I woke up. That's usually how sleep works. Since this body was awakened from the pods. He could see a flash of something cross her face. Embarrassment? He wasn't good at determining Yervish emotions aside from anger, fear, disgust, and general prissiness. Ah, of course. You must be rather tired, then, she replied softly. Yes, ma'am. We'll take one of the craft back to your apartment, then. I'm sure our questions can wait until you've had some rest. You certainly deserve it. She motioned him towards one of the many patrol craft on the big landing pad, and he nodded. Thank you, ma'am. He let her walk into the structure before he headed towards one of the craft, a little surprised to have had a civil conversation with such a powerful Yervish. He boarded the craft and saw the pilot peer back at him. Back to my apartment. You think this is a taxi, Shade? The grumpy pilot growled out. Do you want me to talk to the council chair? The pilot grumbled and turned back around as he started to get the craft into the air. He stood at the edge of the craft and looked out over the city. For a moment they broke out of the cloud cover and he had to wince and turn away from the sunlight that hit him in the face. He was probably about to pass out in the middle of the day, but he'd long ago given up trying to keep anything even remotely close to normal hours. It didn't matter in the city anyways. Everything was just a cycle of shifts for the citizens of all ages. Work or school, precious little free time, eating and sleep. Soon enough, the massive buildings were mostly blocking the sun, and as they dropped past Sector 2, the sunlight was gone entirely. He felt a bit more comfortable down here. The flight gave him some time to think. The Wardens. He was who knows where in the galaxy or maybe universe, surrounded by Xenos and strange creatures, and the same sort of politics were being played out. They wanted more power, more control, less freedom. Normally, he'd have just scoffed at the idea, but now that he knew his own past once more, the idea made him feel uneasy. That was basically what he'd been working towards back home. He frowned then as he thought it over. Was that what they were talking about? His instincts? Did they know his past when everything had been blurry to him until it finally got triggered? He looked back at the tattoo on his wrist, rubbing it slowly. Never-ending. Infinite. Was that politics and power? No matter the society, was that struggle doomed to be repeated over and over again? The few trying to suppress the rights of the many? But the Union had been around for centuries, right? They'd made democracy work for a hell of a long time, or at least some version of it since an AI regulated everything. Fuck, he growled out as he tried to make sense of it all. The Wardens wanted the lower city out of control. With how things were progressing with the Black Blood, it looked like they were on track to make it happen. He still needed to investigate the bottom of the city to try and find the spot in the memories of the other human and the woman who had died. He needed more time and freedom than he had. If he stopped patrolling and focused on finding the Wardens, then the lower city would just go insane even faster. If he just patrolled, then he'd slow the gradual descent into chaos, but he wouldn't be able to stop it. Was it even possible to stop things from his position? If he told the patrol what he'd found out from the recording, then there was a good chance the people moving behind the scenes would be aware they had been found and act. He wasn't even sure the council would really believe him, recording or no. The recording device in his pocket suddenly felt a lot heavier as he thought about it. He'd have to bring someone in on this. Detective Harmacad, the only Yervish detective he had control over. There was no way that guy was one of the Wardens if he hid his secrets so poorly, right? Well, in general, thanks to his behavior, Vincent figured he could trust him not to be one of the Wardens. But should he really trust a man he was essentially blackmailing? He was blackmailing him to work around total Yervish observation of his activities, but that was still blackmail. Having his memories watched made things incredibly more complicated to hide. Then again, he could now encrypt them. How hard would it be to find a way to explain to the council that he needed to go to the old chairman's house every single day? They knew about that room already. Damn it. He wished he had more friends. Mock was the only person he actively trusted at this point, and even then there was a limit. He was working towards his own beliefs, and for now those beliefs aligned with Vincent's. Shade. Maybe he should bring in Harmacad. If he let him in on some of the secrets, that might make him more willing. Shade. Harmacad was a good man despite his secrecy. He'd have to agree to help Vincent. Shade! Vincent finally looked up and over at the pilot as his train of thought was broken. What? We're here. The pilot waved out the door, and Vincent looked forward, noticing they were on top of his hab. Oh, thanks. He muttered absently and stepped off the craft, hearing it fly off as he walked away. His jacket fluttering against the wind it kicked up. The lift was empty, and he was soon walking down his hall, more trying to stop yawning than anything else. Once inside, he rubbed his eyes and thought about how tired he was, but he couldn't sleep just yet. He walked inside and found his scanning gear before checking through his apartment. Nothing, thankfully. Putting that back, he pulled a chair into his bedroom from the dining room and stood on it. He pulled the recording device from his pocket and reached up into the vent, feeling way up over the second shelf to set it next to the black box. That done, he put the chair back in the other room and he began to pull off his shoes on his way back to bed. By the time his head hit the pillow, he was down to his pants, but he was too tired to take them off. As he began to drift off to sleep, he contemplated just shooting himself in the head. That way, he wouldn't have to suffer through waking up all groggy. But as his lids closed, it was too late. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this one today. Thank you so much for being here with me. And I'm reading some of these comments, and this story was from 7 years ago. Holy shit. Wow, that's a long time ago. 7 years ago, I was 25 and in worse shape than I am now. I am feeling so much better these days. Oh, hope everyone had a great New Year's. Happy New Year, guys. Happy 2022. Betty White died for our sins. I I love it. I love the memes. I hate that she's gone. I really thought she was going to make it to 100. And once she was 100, she would have been president. Did you guys know that? Once you hit 100, you automatically become president of the United States, and we have to do everything you say. So that would have been really cool to have Betty White as president, but that's all right. I love you guys so much. Thank you for this last year. It's been amazing, and I only see better things coming for all of us. I think the world is going to get better. I think discourse is going to grow because people need it. And we need to kill Facebook. And we need to kill a lot of things. But I'm hopeful, guys. I'm really hopeful. And I can't wait to share this journey with you. You all have a fantastic rest of your day. Like, comment, subscribe as always. I got to put that in there. Hit the bell as well. I want to do an Anthony Fantano so bad. God, his sign off is so funny. Hit the bell. Please hit the like and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Like, all that whole thing is so fucking funny. But anyway, guys, I do want to ask you what's the weirdest dream you've ever had? What's the weirdest dream you've ever had? The weirdest dream I ever had was, I don't know. It's hard because like they all flee from you eventually, right? But I had one that was pretty odd where like I don't remember exactly how this. It was actually there's a nightmare I had when I was a kid that was fucking terrifying, and I was put in a room with a body, and it was just sitting in a rocking chair for some reason, and then it moved, and that has terrified me forever. So that one sucked, but all right, tell me about your nightmares. All right, guys, I love you. Bye, y'all.